Welcome back. We're live with John Checco. He is a doctoral candidate of Marymount University. He is an accomplished leader in the space of information security and technology. He has been focused on supporting strategic cybersecurity initiatives for major Fortune 500 companies. He is also co-chair for the annual New York Metro Joint Cybersecurity Conference. Um, yeah, I was really interested in this presentation because I've heard of all the repercussions of getting a speeding ticket or getting some sort of criminal charge and then going in front of the judge right before lunchtime.
Yeah,
So
I happened to come across this topic by accident, and it really piqued my interest, especially in the age of AI, because this was not this was a typical statistical analysis, and I thought, is there some meat to this? But let's get started. Again, John Checco. Actually, I started my career at IBM Watson Research in the AI lab back in the late 1980s. AI back then was considered a expert system, and it was done on a PC with DOS, and we actually interconnected them, two of them by serial port, and had one advising the other. And we did experiments to see how people would react to what they call smart help, unsolicited help, while they were doing their word processing. So it was really interesting. From there, I actually went to 9X Science and Technology in the AI group there in the early 90s. And again, AI was not the AI you think of today. Again, it was more expert systems and decision systems. And we started exploring because the internet, or TCP/IP, and HTTPS had just come out, and we were trying to experiment, how this would affect. We didn't call it the internet back then. We actually called it new media back then. So that just kind of gives my age away. But I actually came across this article about the hungry judge effect through one of my social media feeds, and I'm going for my doctorate in cybersecurity at Marymount, and part of that is an AI track. And I was looking. I said, well, that's an interesting topic. I said, is there something that we can do with AI that kind of verifies or confirms the previous studies? So again, we're going to go through a little bit of context and problem, and some of the constraints, considerations, and then some of the lessons learned. So just bear with me. If I start this came across this article, but the actual original study was done in 2010 by Danziger and other folks. And, it was interesting because they really wanted to look at judicial rulings and whether they can be swayed by extraneous variables, right? So what else is happening in the court system that has no bearing on legal decisions that can affect it? But they made the statement in their abstract that says justice is what the judge ate for breakfast in sequential parole decisions. That one statement was really taken at face value, and that was the part that was hyped up and exploited. In fact, if you look at this, there was over 600 plus citations from a scholar site on this one paper. And right after this paper came out, there was another paper that was looking at that data by Weinshall-Margel Shapard that looked at the same data, and again, they were looking to see that maybe the case ordering was not random, and maybe other factors other than hungry judge was set to affect parole decisions. And what they said was that basically the way cases were heard in that system was that people who had legal representation always went first, because those cases went quicker. People who were self-representing or had no legal representation were usually saved for later in the session. And because they didn't have that legal representation, they were less likely to be granted parole. That sounds logical, but the proof there was actually it was a simulation. And again, that only got 30 citations, even though they were looking at the same data and analyzing it in a little bit of different way. Then you move up to 2016. And they actually, this title was more inflammatory than it was had meat to it, because again, they were looking for another way of explaining that statistical artifact. And in reality, it was just a thought experiment. They did not do any pure analysis on this, which kind of disappointed me, because the title was looking at, had more content than the actual paper. So let's switch over, and then we start seeing, well, do we have some other AI-based papers on this type of subject? And the closest one I came to was this Lacarouche, which was basically talking about selective labeling, meaning that can we take bias out of our AI decision-making systems? So, and we'll get into the data parameters a little later to talk about what's biased and what's not. And what they found was that they something called contraction, which basically says even if you take the biased parameters out of an AI, there are related parameters that relate to the biased parameters that do affect the decision making. So in effect, it's an indirect bias that you're getting from the AI. And that, again, goes back to that hungry judge effect. If we're going to start looking at it, what do we see with it? And again, that one got a little bit more citations, about 70 plus citations. It's actually a really good paper. So if you have a chance to read it, I would suggest reading it. And then finally, a few years ago, this other paper was actually looking at that hungry judge effect from a legal standpoint. And basically, they were just saying that we shouldn't make judicial decision making from using AI, because AI is fallible, and they are not recommending, or they were rebuffing the use of AI in decision making. I think that's a bit of an obvious answer, but let's see why it's so obvious. Okay, and that had less than 10 citations. So, is it overhyped or under-researched? Well, if we look at the original Danziger study, right, again, we talked about 600 citations. I thought it was incomplete analysis, concluding an implied factor of hunger, when in fact hunger was not even measured in this study. And then, again, all the other analyses on the same data were just thought experiments. There was nothing really mind-blowing or definitive or defensible about some of these other studies. I think about this parallel with the opioid crisis, right? And if you think about, if anybody's seen Dope Sick or looked at the opioid crisis itself, right? There was a letter to the editor in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it was just a letter that said opioids were not addictive, and it was again an op-ed piece. It was less than 5 sentences long, and it was basically an opinion, not a peer-reviewed analysis. And that one letter actually has over 600 citations, and which kind of led to all the pharmaceutical manufacturers citing that their new opioids were not addictive. And again, things get blown out of proportion because nobody took the time to research the original citation. One of the things I've learned in my doctorate courses is that if you're getting secondhand information, you have to go back and you have to look at the firsthand information to see if it's actually valid. And if it's, a lot of times we find that we find exactly what this is, that maybe it's anecdotal or it's secondhand, and it can't be, and it's not defensible. So that being said, there's some references here, and again, when we share the presentation, you can actually look up these references yourself. But the letter to the editors is real easy. It's only 5 sentences long, and all of a sudden, you have a whole pharmaceutical industry based on those 5 sentences. So I wanted to take the original data, and I want to run it through some AI algorithms, and want to see if I was going to get similar data, same data. Actually, I went to Danziger. They didn't respond, but I went to Weinshall-Margel Shapard, and Shepard actually gave me the original data that they used, which was a copy of the original Danziger study. So for all intents and purposes, it was the original data used by the Danziger study. It covered 8 judges over 10 days. Judges had 2 to 3 sessions per day, and not every judge showed up every day. So there's only about 129 total sessions. That sounds like a lot of data. In fact, in those sessions, it was over 1,000 decisions recorded. So you think 1,000 is a good data point. And we'll find out later why that isn't. But each session was 2 hours in length. One session actually almost went 3 hours in length, but every session had about 5.5 decisions. Most of them had 5 decisions, and the variance was large. Like some sessions only had 1 decision, other sessions had 21 decisions. So again, there's a lot of variation in this, and that was my first red flag that maybe the analysis wasn't solid. So let's talk about some of the inherent biases of the Danziger study. So the way Danziger mentioned hunger was that the judges had 2 food breaks a day, a late morning snack and a lunch, which served to break up the day's deliberation to 3 distinct decision sessions. So that's interesting because they took breaks, they happened to eat. Maybe that was, again, is it the time or is it the hunger, right? So then what happens is they use the word hunger as a correlation to the later ordinal sequences of each section. And then there's all these other parameters that they recorded in the data, right? Whether the person had legal representation, what was the severity of the crime, how long were they sentenced for, how long did they serve before going to parole, was there an availability for rehabilitation, what was their nationality, which was just a binary because this was an Israeli court, and basically the nationality was either you were Israeli Jewish or Israeli Arab. There's no play in that. And then the gender, male or female. So I decided to kind of take a more pragmatic approach. And I said, let's not call it hunger. Let's not over simplify this. Let's change it to fatigue, because basically fatigue tells me how long into the session or how long into the day are you doing your decision making. Nationality was removed because, again, there's known inherent biases against those of Arab descent. So I wanted to make sure I took that out and just ignored that as a known bias parameter. And gender was removed because there was only a single female in all those 1,112 decisions. So I thought I was doing a good thing. So I said, okay, let's now look at the fatigue numbers, and let me try and come up with 4 different fatigue numbers from the original data. So I figured for each session, are they fatigued by time? How far into the session are they? Or by caseload, how many cases they've heard up to that point. And same thing with daily fatigue. How many cases they've heard up to that point in the day, and by time, how deep into the day they were when they were looking at that. Then I decided to take those parameters and break them into 2 big buckets. One was parole characteristics, right? What does the parolee have or do that can affect the decision making? And that kind of goes down to the Weinshall-Margel claims of legal representation. And of course, we have the crime severity and month sentence served and rehabilitation. And then I said, what's the original Danziger study talked about extraneous factors. So what were the extraneous parameters of the study? And that was all the fatigue numbers, the case number, and the session number. So I took that and I said, let's apply this to some simple statistical analysis, right? I used Python with the scikit-learn kit. Again, very easy to use and very, very informative, because I can actually look at some of the internals of what's going on. So I just did some very simple correlation, and I found that, if you see here, the arrow with the J means it's a judge parameter. The yellow arrow with a P means it's a parolee characteristic. And I saw that the highest order of negative correlation was with daily fatigue by the caseload, right? And the most positive, which is barely positive, was the availability for rehab. And I guess that kind of, I don't know if that makes much sense, but I said, okay, those are the numbers from a simple correlation. And again, neither of them happen to align with either the Danziger study or the Weinshall-Margel Shapard study. So that kind of intrigued me a little more. I said, let me go a little deeper. Let me use the decision tree. The love thing about the decision tree is I can see how the decision tree breaks down until the genie gets to 0. I didn't put the whole tree here, but if you notice here that there's only a few parole decisions. One is how long they were imprisoned for, like how much did they serve, and the other was how serious was their offense. But all the rest was basically fatigue numbers, which I thought was interesting. And it was fatigue by caseload or session fatigue by time. Session fatigue by time was basically the hungry judge parameter that we saw originally. Okay, a little more interesting, but did that give me any sense of what's going on? So I said, all right, let me do the random forest. And again, the random forest, I can look at mean impurity importances, feature importances. And again, I saw daily fatigue by the caseload to be the highest correlation there, followed by the session fatigue in caseload and the daily fatigue in time. Interesting, all fatigue numbers and all kind of away from what the hungry judge effect was defined as. Now I kind of did some accuracy measurements. So if I looked at all the factors all together and I used that original correlation, right, I had a 71% accuracy with the random forest against all the parameters. And listen, if I was a parolee and I had I would not use that as a statistic of whether I was going to get parole or not. I definitely would not use that. If I actually look at the Danziger hypothesis and just only focus on that parameter, it's a little bit higher accuracy, 77% accuracy. But again, not something I would bet my parole decision on. So again, it's not going anywhere. Even with the Weinshall-Margel hypothesis of legal representation, only 75% accurate. Again, not something I would bet on. Now, if I did the random forest and I looked at the daily fatigue by caseload, it is much higher, 82%. But is 82% something I want to say, hey, this is where I want to be, and basically, say I want to make sure I'm in that 82 percentile. Again, not something I would do or plan on. So what about all this? And I know I didn't go into the LLMs, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later. Well, listen, bottom line, I don't think there was enough data. It was only a single courthouse in a country, in a single country. So even though there were multiple courts and judges, there was only, I would love to see more regions, more facilities, and more judges involved. I would love to see the statistics of the number of judges to be in the hundreds of thousands, or the regions to be in the hundreds of thousands. I think it wasn't a diverse enough data set, right? The crimes themselves had a very simplified severity rating. The nationalities, again, were just binary, whether you were an Arab Jew or an Israeli Jew or an Israeli Arab. So I think we needed more diverse data, and I don't think it lasted long enough. It was only over 10 days. And, I think that's not enough time to discover trends. If we did multi-year, we could see seasonal issues. We may see other issues that come out over time. I'm a big fan that data is king. I'm also a big fan that, the garbage in is garbage out, and you get what you pay for. So all those studies that are relying on the original hungry judge effect analysis is just, again, you get what you pay for. It is what it is. And all this is just my opinion. It's not, this was not anything statistical about my AI truth here. However, there are other things that I did find defensible, that you can't remove bias from the AI decision process. I said Lakarazu before has a study on real world data sets, and this actually, they did span healthcare insurance and criminal justice, and they removed the obvious bias parameters, but they found that the decision process majority actually had a correlation to those unobservables, to those inputs that were removed. So it was a high correlation between what the decision process came out with and the factor of that decision process and the factor against the bias. And to me, the bottom line is that, everything is connected. You can take out the obvious bias. You think about crime in minority neighborhoods. Crime is higher in minority neighborhoods. Does that mean the minorities are more apt to crime? No, but there is a correlation there. And so everything is connected. We can't get away from that. And we have to understand that. There's a great book by Kumar and Anderson called Not With a Bug, But With a Sticker. And it's basically a little primer on AI and some of the issues of AI. I like the synopsis here is that AI is a digital version of the Dunning-Kruger effect, meaning that we have an unrequited trust or an inherent trust in AI because they're crunching numbers and they're replacing numbers with objects that we have empathy with. And so if you think about this, AI is a calculation. It's complex, but again, when they start applying pixels or sounds or words that we can identify with, we have this inherent trust without verifying. In fact, we can only spot hallucination if we already know the proper outcome. So, when we're looking at AI and LLM outputs, and we're saying that's obviously not right, it's because we already have an idea of what the answer should be. We have those guardrails. But then when we start asking it questions where we want to know what the answer is because we don't know the answers, we don't know if it's hallucinating, creation, or truth. And so we want to believe. The fact is that we just don't have a good way of trusting that output, even when the temperature is set to 0. So I mentioned before that I didn't use any advanced LLMs, and the reason I didn't is because this was a highly computational type of study, and we know that LLMs are great for creativity stuff, but they're not really good at arithmetic analysis, right? If you want, there's this quite recent story about AI versus the strawberry, which says how many R's are in strawberry, and it kept coming back as 2. And again, it's just because they're not made to do arithmetic analysis. And if you want to read more about that, there's this whole area of embedding Q-star in with Gen AI, which is again, I've read about it. I don't know too much the details in it, but the whole idea of Q-star embedded with LLMs would make it more arithmetically accurate. The other reason I didn't use LLMs is because I want it to be explainable, and I don't have a way from a consumer or study research standpoint right now to look at some of the explainability between some of the deep neural networks, right? So I want to be able to retrace a decision, and right now I can't do that. I know there are some corporate enterprise tools out there that are on the verge or have a good way of looking at that. I don't have access to them. But here, with LLMs, the outcomes are not verifiable to me, so therefore they're not defensible. And if you're looking to make a parole decision based on your own life and the demeanor of the judge, this is not the way to do it. So my closing thoughts. I just want to say that if we inherently trust AI-based analysis, right? That's that Kumar and Anderson book, and we do this all the time. We see these cool things with Gen AI with pictures, right? And we fail to see some of the some of the mistakes in the pictures, like 6 fingers, right? Until someone points it out. But think about this. That same type of AI is used for advertising, right? So how's it affecting our buying habits, that inherent trust? How is that inherent trust affecting our cybersecurity hygiene, our emotional stability? I know that's a huge topic, but even our physical health. And also in this election year in the U.S., misinformation and deepfakes with national security. There's just, me personally, I think in-person events are going to come back because people have no way of looking at Zoom or webinars or video or audio or even the newsreels and say this is real and this isn't real, right? We have to have so in my mind, we have to have a healthy skepticism with anything AI generated. Actually, with all the information that we come across in our daily lives. So the bottom line is, don't trust me because I'm on a video right now, and you don't know if this is AI generated or not. So that's all I have. And if you have any questions about this study, or if you want access to the data, just give me shoot me an email, jchecco@marymount.edu.
John, that's hilarious. You just ended the presentation by saying, "Don't trust anything I've ever told you." But it's no, man. You make a really good point. How can you base 30 plus subsequent research papers on a sample size that took over 10 days with a
Yeah.
thousand decisions?
Yeah, and there's some other newer studies out there that are looking at parole decisions. I did not include them because they seem to be clustered in little groups, right? There's no they're not taking the same parameters, and they're small and they're regional. So I think a lot of people are doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome, right? Insanity.
If they treated the criminal justice system like they treat the development of new drugs, I wonder what would happen. I wonder what we would uncover. You know?
Yeah. And listen, again, I've been involved in AI since the late '80s, and I find that everything has a purpose. And to me, AI, what I call purpose-built AI that is trained with specific data to make specific decisions, is really good, right? But using Gen AI to make your business decision, to me, not so good.
Excellent. I appreciate you citing those research papers. The strawberry one I saw floating around for quite some time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, how are you transporting this to your doctorate studies?
Actually, this was like I said, there's an AI track in the doctorate study. My actual doctorate dissertation is on threat intelligence, but actually AI plays a big part in threat intelligence gathering now, especially in attribution. So I did not add an AI component to the dissertation, but I might, because a lot of threat intelligence generation and a lot of threat intelligence consumption is now AI generated, and that worries me. If you're doing defensive operations, not so much, but if you're going to do offensive operations and hackbacks, you got to get attribution correct. I mean, so it has to be defensible, and that's the word I love using, is it has to be defensible, because you might be, shutting off a hospital network if you're thinking you're attacking a hacker, right?
Yeah, even no, that's a great point. Even if they mandate the usage of watermarks to say what has been manufactured by an AI tool or platform, who's to say that somebody won't strip it or misuse it or mix it up with human in the elements and convert it into something?
Exactly. It's only software, and when you say I'm going to modify this software to have watermarks or licensing or whatever, someone's going to have a copy of that software and
Turn it off.
take it out, right, and turn it off. Or again, if you think about the watermarks, when you upload something to YouTube, in the old days, it would just take the raw video file and replay it back to the consumers, but the WMFs would also have links in it to malware. So what YouTube do, they would filter or re-record everything you upload into their format, stripping out any data or any links that they deemed that was malicious. So same thing with AI. AI generated video could go through a reprocessing filter that would take out all the watermarks.
Interesting. What's coming next for you?
I have a lot of things in the pipeline. I'm actually looking at how AI is going to be used in automobiles. Again, I'm still focusing my dissertation on that threat intelligence, and I want to make sure that I get that correct, because I think that's going to be hopefully impacting across the industry. And again, I'm always keeping my eye on the next AI. I mean, I run Olama almost every day. I'm always downloading the latest models. But and you've probably talked about this before, but AI is different than software. Software is just code that you have to worry about. AI is code, models, and training data, right? And so there's three components, two of which you have no control over. So there's something to be said there. But thank you for having me. I thought this was great.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the bringing skepticism into the mix and having us doubt our everyday actions. Healthy skepticism. Yeah, no, of course. We'll take a short break, and then we're going to have another presentation lined up. See you guys soon.